Hello, Tara here. We're on chapter 27. We're almost done. So, in the previous chapter, they're both like, oh, I miss them. Isabel's like, oh, he's probably forgotten about me and he doesn't want to move to the island because I'm not moving to London. And Benjamin's like, I'm not good enough. And you're just like, no, kiss. Just do it. Just get together. Let's see what happens. Chapter 27. Isabel thanked God that she was able to be with her niece in London, to help with plans and preparations, and soon to attend the wedding itself, when she had long feared she would be unable to do so. She was even growing fond of Mr. Adair. Isabel had not seen Mr. Booker since her return. Now that the court cases were behind them, there had been no reason for him to call. She missed him, but did not allow herself to dwell on her disappointment. She wanted nothing to dampen Rose's happiness. Together they selected wedding clothes for Rose, including gowns and other finery. Their shopping trip to warehouses, dressmakers, and milliners took them to several areas of London Isabel was less familiar with. Thankfully, the new coachman and groom were resourceful fellows. Seated with her niece in their carriage, amid stacks of parcels and bandboxes, Isabel looked out at the landmarks and street names as they passed. When she saw the Grey Coat Hospital, she said, "Do you know? Mr. Booker mentioned his parents lived near here." "Oh?" Rose looked out with interest. "Shall we stop and see his father's shop?" "On what pretense?" Isabel asked. "Need we a pretense?" "Well, I would not want Mr. Booker to hear we came poking around." "He would be glad you showed an interest in his family. I know I am. Besides, I am all out of, licorice lozenges." Isabel raised an eyebrow. "Licorice?" Purely for medicinal purposes, I assure you." Rose sniffed daintily. "I feel a slight cold coming on." "I see." Knowing her niece was hoaxing her, and fond of licorice, she did not worry. Rose looked perfectly healthy to her, and she supposed it would do no harm to stop by. An apothecary's shop was open to everyone, after all. A smart rap to the roof with her umbrella brought the carriage to a stop. She instructed the groom to take them to Booker's apothecary shop next. The young man stopped to ask a passerby the way. Sorry. He's asking the way from a passerby. Then directed the coachman down Rochester Row to Willow Street. Reaching the address, the two women alighted, Rose all eagerness, and Isabel feeling unaccountably nervous. The many-paned bowed window looked freshly painted and in good repair. As they approached, Isabel read the rather new-looking sign with interest. Thomas Booker, Surgeon Apothecary, Member of the Royal College of Surgeons, Patients seen in home or at office. Proprietary and patent medicines sold. For a few moments they stood at the window, peering at the display of colorful jars and ready-made remedies. Isabel's nerves tingled with anticipation. Should they do this, or was it too forward of her? What would she say to his father? When Isabel hesitated, Rose pushed open the door and vigorously gestured her inside. Taking a deep breath, Isabel complied. The shop bell jingled, and strong aromas greeted her, exotic and earthy. She looked up and noticed the source. Strings of herbs hanging in bunches from the ceiling beams. Isabel glanced around the orderly premises with approval. Shelves of neatly arranged pottery jars lined two walls. Below these were rows of small, knobbed drawers. A tidy counter held pill tiles, mortars and pestles, scales, and other tools of the trade. To the right was a closed door marked surgery. To the rear, a discreet, unmarked door, to the family's private quarters, she guessed. That door opened, and her stomach lurched. She steeled herself to meet his stern father, but instead, Benjamin Booker himself stepped out. "Yes!" She stifled a gasp. He looked as stunned to see her, and her cheeks instantly heated. Oh, why had she allowed Rose to persuade her to come inside? For a moment he stood speechless, then quickly recovered. Miss Wilder! Miss Lawrence! Welcome! What a pleasant surprise! Mr. Adair mentioned your return. How goes your time in London? She answered mechanically, all the while longing to know what was passing in his mind, and if there was any chance he still cared for her. He politely congratulated Rose on her upcoming wedding. Rose smiled. Thank you. We are so grateful for all you've done for us. You are very welcome. Not only had Mr. Adair agreed to the new marriage settlement he had drawn up, but his parents were so appreciative of Benjamin's legal work on behalf of their son that they'd recommended him to their many acquaintances. Rose added, I do hope you will come to our wedding. I would be honored. Thank you. He tucked his hands behind his back and rocked awkwardly on his heels. So, what brings you here? I hope you are not poorly. Surely there are apothecaries nearer St. James's. Isabel faltered. No, we simply... That is, we did not expect to see you here. I thought you would be in the law office today, or we would not have intruded. He lifted one brow, a touch of vulnerable humor in his eyes. No, I am sorry to hear it, for I am happy to see you. I had intended to pay a call on you tomorrow. Oh, well, Good. This is hilarious. She looked away from his too direct gaze. A woman in her mid-50s stepped out from the same door. His mother, she guessed, noticing the similar dark eyes and wavy hair. Seeing her, Benjamin said, Will you allow me to introduce my mother to your acquaintance? Of course. Miss Wilder, Miss Lawrence, please allow me to present Mrs. Booker. Isabel and Rose curtsied, then Isabel impulsively advanced, hand extended. I am so happy to meet you, Mrs. Booker. Your son has spoken so highly of you. Has he indeed? I am all astonishment. Her intelligent eyes glinted playfully, and she looked from one to the other with a warm, slightly crooked smile. And I can return the compliment. And I can return the compliment, Mrs. Booker added, as he was just praising you in my hearing. Isabel knew not what to say to that, but Rose was not so shy. Was he indeed? Benjamin looked down embarrassed. Mamma. Do tell, Mrs. Booker, Rose urged, sending Benjamin a teasing grin. Mrs. Booker gestured to the door behind her. Come up to our humble sitting room, ladies, and I shall tell all. Benjamin groaned. I am doomed. Yes, my dear, you are, his mother said with a wink, thoroughly pleased with herself. She linked arms with Isabel and led the way. Oh, this is great. Isabel thought his mother delightful and liked her immediately. Before they departed that day, Mrs. Booker extracted a promise from Isabel to join them for Christmas dinner. Knowing Rose would be busy with the Adairs, Isabel agreed. She knew it was probably foolish to spend time with Benjamin and his family. It would be wiser to guard her heart. He had been offered a partnership here in London, and she was going home to Belle Island after the wedding. But she could not resist savoring this time with him, and planned to store away sweet memories for lonely nights to come. On Christmas, Isabel returned and met the rest of the Booker family. His father was somewhat serious and reserved, but he made an effort to be polite and to include her in conversation, asking well-thought-out questions about her home and family. His brother Reuben joined them for dinner too. She instantly saw the resemblance between the two, both tall and lanky with dark wavy hair, but for her part, she thought Benjamin far more handsome. Yeah. At first, Reuben struck her as rather proud and aloof, but as the evening progressed, he warmed to her and became more talkative. The two brothers roasted one another a bit, as brothers will do, but amid the teasing and barbs, she saw mutual admiration and fondness between them. It made her miss her own brother and sister, and she wondered what it would be like to become a member of such a family. After dinner, Benjamin escorted her home and said he would see her at the wedding, but he said little else, leaving Isabel to wonder what he was thinking. On the appointed day, Mr. Booker, as good as his word, showed up at the church to witness the solemnization of Rose and Christopher's marriage. He looked handsome and masculine in a new blue tailcoat, his hair freshly cut. After the service, he came to the house in St. James's Square for the wedding breakfast. He wished the bride and groom happy, then approached Isabel. He bowed over her hand and said in a low voice, "You are to be congratulated as well, Miss Wilder. I know you hoped this wedding would take place on Belle Island, or at least in Riverton, but it was beautiful, even here in London. Best of all, you are here to share Rose's joy, as you've long wished." He added with a lopsided grin, "Does it make me sound ancient to say I am proud of you?" Isabel felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. She pressed his hand and smiled at him. "Thank you." He took his leave shortly after that. Isabel was sad to see him go, but too busy greeting guests and making sure they had plenty to eat and drink to try to prevent him. And really, she told herself, why delay the inevitable? After the celebration was over and Rose and Mr. Adair set out on their wedding trip, Isabel returned to Belle Island. She again made her home there, but planned to return to London to visit Rose now and again after the couple settled down to live in St. James's Square. Perhaps she might see Mr. Booker and his family on occasion as well. In the meantime, she kept herself busy overseeing the few remaining repairs, answering questions that arose, and watching the progress and eventual completion of the new workshop and bridge with satisfaction. That March, against all dire predictions about the osier beds after such a flood, they had an excellent harvest. With the coming of spring, new life returned to Belle Island, and Isabel Wilder was filled with hope for the future. There was some fun stuff in that chapter. Come on! Just talk to each other. Say what you're feeling. We'll see what happens in the last chapter.